ladies and gentlemen. It's really a pleasure to be speaking to you again in these monumental times. But first, a word of thanks to the cross-party group and its chair, my good friend Pauline McNeill, for giving me this rather timely opportunity to update you on the situation in Palestine. Last time I spoke to you, we were in the grip of a global pandemic that confined the world to its home. Strange times indeed. And we seem to have emerged from the pandemic now, but it hasn't gone away. We are also witnessing a war in Europe that has seen the West unleash unprecedented financial sanctions against one of the largest economies in the world. Oil prices are through the roof, as you are all following. Global recession looms, poverty in rich countries and starvation in poor. These are serious times, very serious times. Amidst all this, the Palestinian issue remains almost comfortingly familiar. But that is about as positive a spin as I can put on an open wound that has shamefully been left to fester so long that it is almost impossible to dress. Almost. I say almost because I am an optimist. Always will be. I look for possibilities, openings, opportunities, like we all do. I can still see some opportunities, but they are hard to spot behind the gunfire, the murdered journalist, the tear gas smoke and construction debris that Israel is using in illegal settlements all over the occupied West Bank. That really is sinking any chance of a peaceful, negotiated two-state outcome. But first, though, let me give you an overview of what is happening on the ground. Pauline and your colleagues have asked me for an update, and perhaps it is crucial to start by having an overview of what is happening on the ground as we speak. And let me first start in the South Hebron Hills, where the mass eviction of some 1,200 people in 20 communities, villages in Masafer Yatta has already started. The starting gun of this latest round of ethnic cleansing was fired in early this May, by an Israeli Supreme Court judge, by the way, British-born, whose ruling cleared the way for the forcible removal of these indigenous villages, ostensibly because the Israeli military has confiscated this land in occupied territory as a firing zone. So they confiscated it under the pretext that they wanted for a firing zone. This would mark the biggest forcible population transfer in decades. But it is by no means the only one, my friends. Of course, such forcible displacements are against international law, as you all know. And let us all remember that such population transfers are also a trigger for unrest and anger. Last year, Israel attempted to remove families from their homes in East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, as you all followed, we all followed. That attempt sparked a devastating assault on Gaza and confrontations before it. And the war on Gaza left more than 250 dead, including 67 children. But while there is a temporary lull in Sheikh Jarrah as we speak, Jerusalem remains a hot spot of tension because of the Israeli attempts to remove Palestinians from the occupied east part of the city, move in Jewish settlers and alter the status quo around the city's holy sites. Thus, this year alone, the United Nations reports that 62 structures, homes, were demolished in East Jerusalem. 177 people were displaced as a result. Moreover, religious tensions are being provoked with Israeli attempts to grant more and more access to Jews to East Jerusalem generally and its holy sites specifically over local Muslims and Christians. This was most obvious during Ramadan. This Ramadan, I'm sure you have followed some of the tension there, which this year coincided also with Passover and Easter. Hundreds of people were wounded as Israeli soldiers repeatedly entered Al-Aqsa Mosque with guns, clubs, tear gas, grenades. And as you all know, Al-Aqsa Mosque is the third holiest mosque in Islam and the first direction of prayer for the Muslim community worldwide. Israel also imposed tight restrictions on the number of Christians and Muslims, Palestinian Christians and Muslims, who could access these holy sites, who could visit Jerusalem from the West Bank to attend the holidays, including the Holy Fire ceremony, by the way, at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. There were severe restrictions of the number of Palestinian Christians who could actually access the church and celebrate Easter. At the same time, Israel has been clearing the compound whenever, and I mean here by the compound, the Aqsa compound, whenever Jewish extremists and settlers want to visit. And I use the word carefully because most of them are extremist groups. A record, 2,600 Jews entered the Aqsa compound this year alone. This year, from the beginning of this year. These visits are arranged by far-right religious groups who want Al-Aqsa Mosque to become a place of Jewish worship and ritual sacrifice. And you may have seen on the media that many of these groups were actually captured with animals to sacrifice in the vicinity of the holy Mosque of Al-Aqsa. Some want to build a Jewish temple in its place. These visitors, between two parentheses, these visitors are enabled by the Israeli government, the Israeli security services, apparatuses, the occupation forces who impose these visits over the heads of the mosque authorities and the Palestinian and Jordanian leaderships. If you remember, Jordan has custodianship over Jerusalem's holy sites. Jordan has been among the most vocal in protesting Israel's breaches in Jerusalem. These visits are simply provocations. My friend, they are provocations. They are an imposed and unwanted intrusions against a people under military occupation. All of this has nothing to do with the freedom of worship. It has everything to do with tightening Israeli control over the noble sanctuary and occupied Jerusalem's old city generally. Witnessed the so-called flag march recently at the end of last month, end of May, which settlers hold every year in Jerusalem to celebrate the illegal occupation of Jerusalem. What you may not have seen, if you only followed the BBC's coverage, by the way, is that march was accompanied by chants of deaths to Arabs, other outrageous expressions of outright racism by many of the 25,000 people who took part in that march. We fear, my friends, we do fear that all this is simply a prelude to Israel doing to Al-Aqsa Mosque what it did to Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron, which is dividing it physically and time-wise. And let me remind you and remind all of us that this is occupied territories. Such impositions are clearly illegal under international law. So, my friends, this year has been a deadly one so far, as you may not have seen. Some statistics, since Palestinian fatalities do not always make the news. I mean, regrettably, Palestinian death and injuries do not always make it on the news here and elsewhere. But since the beginning of this year, Israel has killed 69 Palestinians, including 13 children, since the beginning of 2020. 13 children. Among the slain are Shireen Abu Aqli. You all have followed her, a journalist, and she was killed simply while doing her job. So the world's silence over her killing has been really shameful. The protection of journalists is incumbent upon an occupying military, but Israel has killed 46 journalists since the year 2000. I repeat, 46 journalists, suggesting Israel is not taking its international obligations very seriously. And as for the casualties here, we can take any year and find a similar situation. In 2021, Israel killed 355 Palestinians and injured more than 16,000 people. 78 of the killed were children. That was last year. During the same year, 14 Israelis were killed. So what is the constant in all that? The constant is Israel's military occupation, the denial of Palestinian rights, and the lack of accountability. And to make things and matters worse, my friends, there is a complete lack of any political horizon as we speak. I wish there is. And we are working hard now with the European Union, with the US administration, the Biden administration, with many international partners to try and create such a lacking political horizon. By the way, we expect a visit by President Biden next month. His senior teams are in Ramallah these days. There is a lot of discussions about how do we use that opportunity to re-kick up a political process, a political horizon. But as far as any Palestinian is concerned, the future will only bring more of what I just described: more occupation, more settlements, the continued oppression of the Palestinian people. Last summer, when a new Israeli coalition government was sworn in, people expressed some hope. Many governments, including the UK government, and beyond, expressed some hope that perhaps the end of Netanyahu might set us back on some kind of peace track. But those people forgot who Naftali Bennett is. Naftali Bennett, the current Israeli prime minister. This is an Israeli coalition that includes far-right religious extremists and supremacists, actually. Bennett himself is a former head of the Yisha Council, the Yisha Council of the Settlements. So he himself was the leader of the settler movement, who, during his election campaign, bragged about killing Palestinians when he was a soldier. In Netanyahu's time in office, Bennett was constantly calling for more settlements and shouting it out. During his own time in office, Bennett tried to start the first new settlement that did not grow out of a settlement outpost in years, with long worked out plans for the Kalandia airport, right by Ramallah, by the way. And in this March, a new outpost was created just 400 meters from the village of Batir, west of Beit Lahem. This is the middle of an area that the UNESCO declared a World Heritage Site in danger. And in May, last month, the Israeli government approved the construction of another 4,000 settlement units. There are over 130, between two parentheses, government-approved settlements in the occupied West Bank, and some 100 unofficial ones, the so-called outposts. Most of these end up with government approval later on, nonetheless. For sure, Bennett will not stand in the way of approval of this expansion. And after all, when Trump's so-called peace plan landed, he was not satisfied with the third of the West Bank that the plan foresaw annexed to Israel. That is Bennett. He was not even satisfied with Trump's complete capitulation to the settler movement and to the far right in Israel. Why only part of it? He said, we need to annex it all. That's Bennett. And he has been clear that there will be no Palestinian state under his watch. He will not meet our president. He will not accept any negotiations. So instead, my friends, under his watch, because there is a lot of talk about this new coalition, and we need to really tackle this with accurate analysis. Under his watch, the Prime Minister of Israel, Bennett, construction settlements continues as it always has under Benjamin Netanyahu, a clear effort to consolidate the Israeli control occupation system. And it is not just settlements, my friends. Now that Bennett's coalition government is wobbling after the resignation of few of his Knesset members, the main contenders for power are already showing how their campaigns are likely to play out. Thus, Netanyahu's Likud party is really fear-mongering about how Arabs are taking over. If you follow their statements, is proposing to jail anyone raising the Palestinian flag, to deport the families of anyone carrying attacks, strip citizenship from anyone demonstrating during war, whatever that means, actually. How do you imprison or strip citizenship from someone demonstrating against a war? And in response to all that, Bennett has been flexing for his own base. The coalition government is reportedly considering deporting families of what they claim to be described as terrorists to Gaza, and demolishing the homes of relatives even, of Palestinian citizens of Israel involved in attacks. A policy of collective punishment, of course, and no longer confined even only to the occupied territory. So this is the kind of rhetoric that passes for politics in Israel. And I'm not saying this by way of complaining. I am saying this by way of understanding the situation and guarding our optimism in one arena and focusing our optimism in arenas that could actually bring change. So meanwhile, home demolitions continue at almost unprecedented rate, my friend, unprecedented rate. 2021, half of which was under Bennett, by the way, last year, saw nearly 900 Palestinian, actually 895 to be precise, left homeless in the West Bank as a result of Israeli house demolitions. This number includes 463 children. 463 children were made homeless because of the house demolitions. And after 2016, the year of 2016, this is the second highest number of demolitions ever. This year looks on track to follow suit. According to the United Nations, 307 Palestinian built structures, homes, shops, including homes, of course, have been demolished since January 1st this year. 307, displacing 437 Palestinians. And you know what? Who needs incitement in such a situation at all levels? And there are the prisoners, my friends. There are the Palestinian prisoners, detainees. Israel currently holds 4,700 Palestinian prisoners. Of those, or of these, 170 are children and 32 are women. Several are elected members of the Palestinian Parliament. 640 men, women, and children are being held in administrative detention. 640 administrative detention, or detention without charge or trial. They can be detained indefinitely like this. And you wonder why the Palestinians sometimes despair. We all wonder. But these headline figures still fail to capture the lived reality of Palestinians under Israel's military occupation, a rule characterized as now increasingly apartheid. It is characterized as apartheid by the United Nations, by the UK's Amnesty International, by the US Human Rights Watch, by Beit Salim, the Israeli human rights organization, by countless Palestinian human rights organizations before them. There is a consensus in the international human rights arena now about Israel practicing the crime of apartheid. So the Israeli rule in occupied territory or inside Israel is a form of that. In law and in practice, discriminates against the Palestinian people native to the land. It is designed to dominate, racial domination of one group over another. So we have apartheid in 2020. In the year 2020, we have apartheid. And if you are a Palestinian citizen of Israel, by the way, you are not free to marry who you want. Your town cannot expand because of restricting and restrictive zoning laws, and you are explicitly barred in the Israeli law from enjoying your right to self-determination as per the nation-state law that was passed in the Knesset a couple of years ago, I think 2018. I don't think I need to go into how Palestinians under such military occupation are treated. And suffice it to say, Palestinians are not free. We are not free. The humiliation, the checkpoints, the walls, and what have you, and some of you have visited. I don't need to visit all that. The danger on lives, even if you commute from your home to school, living under military occupation is absolutely humiliating, and it's constant. It's a constant. So, my friends, it's been 74 years since the wholesale disposition and displacement of the Palestinian people began. It's been 55 years since the occupation of the rest of historical Palestine. It's been 29 years since we signed the Oslo Accords. We have been through generations of politicians from around the world, specifically from the US, the UK, and Europe, talking about international law, international resolutions, and how we must be patient so that we can enjoy our freedom in a state of our own, as called for under international resolutions. And still, nothing has happened. It's been, it is, or a question rather. Is it because the international community is powerless? Why nothing has happened over all these years? 74 years, 55 years, 29 years. Next year, 30 years for Oslo. Is it because the international community is powerless? But my friends, what we are witnessing now in Ukraine defeats this argument. The whole plethora of international tools, sanctions, boycott, divestment are being wielded, applied with determination and focus. These include sanctions, boycotts, divestment, the International Criminal Court. The response has been significant, instant, immediate. I can absolutely guarantee you, had there been a similar effort in Palestine, we would not be where we are today. But nothing is happening. Why? Are we not under occupation? I mean, there is a clarity in international law, international resolution, the UK policy, the US policy, the European Union policy, every country's policy that this is a military occupation. Are we not being prevented from living free, having our own state, having our rights respected? Is this not against international law, international resolution? The longer, my friends, the longer this goes on, the less faith Palestinians and global citizens, international citizens, will have faith in international law, international system, international bodies, and anyone talking about international legitimacy. And not just Palestinians, as I said. And I, given what I do, I go around in the United Kingdom and beyond. It's been clear to anyone with eyes in their heads that international law is merely a plaything of the powerful, a plaything of the powerful. If you are seen as an enemy, you will feel the full force of international anger. If you are a friend, you will be shielded. And if you are Israel, you will be rewarded, even rewarded, with a free trade agreement, as the UK is working on as we speak, unprecedented strategic alliance with loan guarantees and better and more financial and military assistance with ever closer economic cooperation. So how is this going to end the occupation? How is this policy? How is it that such a policy and policymakers around the world either believe or pretend to believe that the current only approach to Israel will work when it clearly hasn't for all these years? I mean, for all these years, for many years, we've been told, myself included, that boycotts do not work. All of a sudden, in a matter of days, boycotts work and sanctions work. And Israel is behaving the way I just described earlier because it can. There are no consequences. That's the bottom line. There are no consequences. And in the lack of consequences, any state, any group would do the same. And this is very dangerous. This is very dangerous. It will not be long before the whole system of the global rules-based order comes tumbling down. And the West's protection of Israeli crimes, putting Israel above the law, making Israel the only exception to the rule, will be top of the list of causes, while that global rules-based system we built together after the horrors of the Second World War would be severely undermined. And it is time, my friends, and I'll end here, it is time not to request but to demand Israeli adherence to international law and resolutions that will bring peace. Time to demand that international law is respected, is implemented equally on all, that will bring peace to Israel and Palestine. It's time to ensure Israeli accountability, that will bring peace to Israel and Palestine. It's time to ban illegal settlement products, ban all this illegal settlement product. This is a legal responsibility on countries like the UK. It's time to recognize the state of Palestine. This is not a gift or a favor. This is a right. It's our right. And it is a long overdue international and United Kingdom responsibility. It is also time to create an international momentum towards peace, to implement international resolutions, not negotiate them. And we are working tirelessly now with our international partners, including with the US and the UK, to try and do just that, try and really create a momentum to end all this. I will end by saying it is not too late, my friends, to work towards a better future for all. I believe it is not too late. I believe we still have the opportunity to do better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for giving us such a wholesome briefing on the history of the conflict, but also the current situation today, including the whole question of international accountability and the current situation of the military illegal occupation of Palestine. I'd like to open it up to questions or even contributions. I see we have Brian Whittle, MSP, Mercedes Alba, MSP, who's joined us. I think we might have Carol Mockin, MSP, as well, who talked to be on the call. If you do wish to, if you could find in the actions, raise the yellow hand. I'm going to start with Brian because I know you have to go soon. So Brian Whittle, if you'd like to be first.
Thanks, Pauline, and thank you very much, Ambassador, for a fulsome rundown of what's been happening since the last time that we spoke. I'm going to make an apology first because I'm going to have to go into the chamber, and it's really quite disappointing because I would like to spend some time with you at some point and actually dig into this and explore not just what's happening, but what the resolutions to this are. For my own little bit, I've been looking at how we can use trade between the countries to start to break down significant barriers, because I, like you, am an eternal optimist. When I look, I only see people. I don't see countries and borders. I just see people in trouble. So if you do make it up to Scotland, or I do make it down there, I would be delighted to spend some time with you, sir, and go into these things at depth. But my question would be where trade fits in all of this, if I could. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'm just going to put that straight, since the shortage of time, to Ambassador Zomlot, if you wanted to respond.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Brian, and I very much look forward to seeing you very soon. And like you, I too, and I think many like us, look at people rather than borders and boundaries and all these structures and institutions sitting. And trade is a key factor here. And by the way, I don't believe that the human being are political animals or even social animals. We are economic animals. And if you follow all of our history, you will see that our congregation and our cooperation and lack of, and our wars are all caused by economic considerations. So this is a key question. And I think focusing on trade and allowing for more trade is going to be a key pillar of our strategy, on the one hand, for our people to sustain, to withstand, to survive, and on the other hand, also to help in the political situation and in the legality. It's a key arena, and I would welcome a follow-up on this question later. In my first visit to Scotland, I met the Minister for Trade and Development, and I met some of the cabinet members, and that was the key discussion, actually, how Scotland can actually lead the way, and how can we promote certain sectors in Palestine. Tomorrow, by coincidence, I have a speech at the Arab-British Chamber of Commerce, where I will be addressing the trade relations, the UK in general, and Palestine, and what are the arenas, the sectors. I would love, Brian, to send you a copy of my speech remarks, where there are certain arenas, particularly, of course, the IT, because we have such a talented community of experts in Palestine, and given the political restrictions, the checkpoints and the traveling and what have you, IT could provide an opportunity for people to work without having to physically undergo all these severe restrictions. But my last sentence to you, Brian, before I allow you to go and hear our good friend, is this: a perfect economic situation, a perfect development. Perfect is the wrong word. A good development under occupation is an impossibility. It's an impossibility because Israel knows that we are all economic animals. Israel knows the importance and the significance of the economic side, and it has used it all the time as a form of collective punishment, be it on Gaza, be it in the West Bank. And the first tool that they use is economic collective punishment, by the way, which is not reported. It's under the radar. And therefore, there is a lot of challenges we have to overcome for us to have even a semi-trade relations, for us to have a healthy economic transactions. But perhaps with good people like you, Brian, we can keep chipping of that huge rock and keep pushing in the direction of trade. And I'm a partner with you in that direction.
Thank you, Brian, for your question. There's no other hands up at the moment. Mercedes, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Pauline. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for coming and speaking to us today and briefing us. So I'm a Labour MSP like Pauline. I live in Dundee and I cover the North East region. As you know, Dundee has a proud tradition of Palestine solidarity. I know that you awarded a member of my CLP, Jim Malone, an award at the weekend. So I'd like to extend solidarity and greetings from Dundee. Yeah, in relation to your call for the boycott and for BDS, I'd just like to reiterate my support for that. I think it's appalling that products that are produced in the occupied territories are effectively welcomed into our country. I don't think it's what the people of the UK or the people of Scotland want to see. I think they would want that situation changed. I suppose if my question for you would be, I know there's a lot of people on the call who aren't elected members, but members of the public, and obviously they work closely with MSPs and councillors. So do you have any, I suppose, asks or things that you'd like to highlight that the wider public and people in Scotland can do to support Palestine, to support the cause of a free Palestine? I'm thinking back to things like when I was at university, I visited the occupied territories as part of a delegation. Obviously, individuals can support BDS and promote the campaign for BDS, maybe write to elected members or organise twinnings through schools or organisations or councils, or just anything else that you'd like to raise or to suggest that people can take away from the call and play a part in freeing Palestine from the illegal occupation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mercedes, and I'm so proud that I had the opportunity to award one of your fellow Dundees. What do you call him? Dundonian?
Dundonians.
Dundonians. He's an honorable man, and he has really contributed a great deal to Palestine over the decades, actually. You know, there are many levels, Mercedes, of engagement and of ideas of how do we help the situation. The first is at the official government level, and I think two words here mark what needs to be done: accountability and recognition. These are the two missing words that could tilt the equation immediately. Accountability of illegalities. Any illegality, any state that commits illegality must be held accountable. Any group must be held accountable. The whole business of putting one side above the law has really created this festering situation I spoke about earlier. And recognition. I mean, the United Kingdom government has been saying for decades they are wholeheartedly, with no reservation, are pro one option only, which is the two-state solution. Okay, fine. You support the two-state solution. Either you recognize the two states, so you level the field, or you don't recognize the two states and you wait for a final political negotiation outcome. To recognize one state and to leave the other is another recipe. So recognition is crucial. There is the local government, and I think you guys are exemplary here in Dundee and in Scotland in general about the local governments, the municipalities. Dundee and Nablus was the first of such twinship, but I cannot overemphasize the importance and the significance of twinship and friendship, because it sustains the relationship, it structures it. You mentioned Jim. Jim was doing most of his work as part of that Dundee, Nablus, and so I would recommend that we focus more there and we enlarge that and we strengthen this relationship and we create special program and we create visits, not only by Dundonians, did I say it right, Pauline? Dundonians to Nablus, but also from Nablus to Dundee, and that exchange of people and between people is crucial. As Brian started by saying, it's all about people at the end. And we have also Glasgow and Bethlehem, so there is a long history of twinship. The third is the civil society, the trade unions. Again, Jim comes here, and many of your colleagues, including yourself, most likely, you had something to do with the trade unions. Trade unions is a huge force, and it's a major. Remember the anti-apartheid movement. Trade unions played a key role in there. So the civil society is crucial. And lastly is the public. And I think the public is lastly not because it's the least significant, but it's the widest, and it's the most sustainable, most strategic, transformative act we could have, because remember in South Africa, apartheid South Africa, governments, including the UK and the US, did not heed calls up until very late in the game. It was the public, the Scottish, the British, the English, the European, the American, that forced governments to take decisions. So no one can underestimate in any way or form the power of the public. And encounters like this, inviting Palestinian speakers, inviting international speakers, engaging in people-to-people activities is something that would be very useful through the twinships. And I am, again, as I said to Brian about trade, I am more than happy to be your partner in this, Mercedes. And you tell me, Pauline can catch me any second, any time. You tell me what help there is, and we will be ready to lend you a hand and to think with you and to act with you.
Thank you. I don't see hands. I'm going to ask a question that might be of interest to people on the call. I noticed that just last week in Norway is going to label products coming out of the West Bank, so that people know who choose to boycott, and that's been slammed by Israel. In fact, I read it in the Haaretz newspaper, an Israeli newspaper, so it's probably pretty reliable. The question I wanted to ask you, Ambassador, is I think that, in fact, you know Jeff Halpern, who did a lot of work. He's done a lot of work on house demolition. He's been to the Parliament a few times. He's coming in September. But it might be worth saying something about the importance of understanding the issue of illegal settlements. Settlements, by their very nature, are illegal, and all of the outposts, and what a barrier they are to anyone who supports a two-state solution. It might be worth speaking to that, because I think it's very important for everyone to understand, if you do support a two-state solution or an independent Palestinian state, that this is a significant barrier to that, Ambassador.
It is, and Israel has been building settlements since day one of the occupation in 1967. And they do not build these settlements only for a negotiation card or tool. They build it to stay, and this is their way of actually maintaining a situation whereby the creation of a state of Palestine becomes an impossibility, which many observers are saying we might have reached that point, or we are about to reach it. And that's what links me to, or what brings me back to the first question about the UK policy, the international policy about two states, and the severely existentially damaging side of the settlements. If you visit, and you do, Pauline, all the time, if you go and take a ride in the West Bank, you will be noticing that the real infrastructure that is being built in the West Bank now is for settlements, not for the Palestinian cities. You will see high roads being built and paved. You will see huge infrastructure, and these so-called settlements are no longer so. They are big colonial cities. Some of them host tens of thousands, like Ariel in Nablus or Kiryat Arba in Hebron, and all these big settlements. And then the question becomes, can Israel remove these illegal colonial settlers when we reach a peace agreement? And already Israel is arguing for years that this is not going to happen. This is not going to happen. So if you want me to name one main obstacle to peace, not one, if there are many obstacles to peace, but if you want me to put what in terms of sequence, what is the first? It's settlements. It is settlements. What led to the failure of previous peace processes was not the issue of refugees, or even other main issues. The issue of settlements, especially in East Jerusalem, was a key stumbling block and a key factor behind so many failures in the past. And that's why what Norway did was important, very important, strategic, and we welcomed it. However, I myself tweeted immediately that this is a step in the right direction, with a but. But it does not fully satisfy the requirements of the international community. Because if Norway agrees that these products are illegal, and Norway does agree, like the UK, then these products must be banned, not labeled. You don't label the ivory products, do you? Ivory products are banned, simple and straightforward. And this is the legal requirement of international states, international contractors of the international system, to ban any illegality from entering their market. The labeling would put the onus or the responsibility or the burden on the consumer. So Mercedes has to decide and has to read these very tiny little things at the back of olive oil and to figure out what does it mean made in the West Bank. I mean, people will not understand. They will be confused. So frankly, throwing the responsibility on consumers is quitting the responsibility of governments, including Norway and the UK, of an actual total and complete ban. Once you reach a ban on this illegal settlement product, you will see the immediate result, the immediate influence of these settlements, because according to most studies, many of these settlers, the majority of them, are there not for ideological reasons or religious reasons or even political reasons. They are there primarily for economic reasons. You know, it's cheaper land, cheaper water, cheaper homes, cheaper farms. So the moment you hit it in the bucket, and the moment you make sure that they will not profit from these illegal colonies, is the moment when you will see that whole enterprise will begin to crumble.
Thank you. Ambassador, I don't know if you want to say anything at all about the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh, or perhaps also the significance of what's been happening in terms of Al-Aqsa Mosque and the violence that we have seen on our news in the last few weeks, and the importance of that.
Well, it was a tragic murder in every sense, but every murder is a tragedy. And Shireen was a beloved daughter of the Palestinian people. She visits them almost every every night. Thank you. Every night, every evening on their TV sets, because she was such a renowned celebrity as a journalist. And she was renowned not only for being a journalist, but she was renowned for being a brave journalist who worked all of her life to cover the truth and to bring out the truth about her people, about her country, about her homeland. She would go to very dangerous places, as she did just moments before she was shot. She would follow the Israeli brutalities to bring it out to the world. So that's why you saw the outpouring love by her people and her community. And her death has really, in a way, her murder encapsulated and embodied the whole story of Palestine. Because on the one hand, you saw the beauty of the nation, the unity of the nation, the resilience of the nation. I was there in Jerusalem during her funeral and burial. I've seen all that happened. I've seen two scenes. The one that on the first, I saw the unity of the Palestinian people, the love, the sheer love that came out of their hearts to Shireen. And I heard the bells of the various churches ringing at the very same time, and the adhan of the mosque of Al-Aqsa also going at the caller for prayer going at the same time. It was coordinated. I saw Muslim Palestinians reciting the Bible and Christian Palestinians reciting the Quran. This is really a scene that was inspiring in every single sense. And you saw the resilience of her pal-peers and the way that they insisted to give her the honor and the respect. But that was on the one hand. On the other hand, Pauline, we've seen the brutality of the Israeli occupation forces. The whole world followed that. And therefore, that moment brought the two contrasts of a nation that is vivid and living and rooted and ancient and loving and determined, and of an occupier that has no space even for the dead, no space even for the dead that they killed, no space for the respect for funerals, for mourners. It's very regrettable and unfortunate. But we hope that in her tragic assassination, some justice will be served. The government, the Palestinian government, has handed a complaint, an official complaint, a case in the ICC against her killers, and we are waiting for the ICC to start investigating. We have no trust in the Israeli judiciary system. I just quoted for you the Supreme Court giving the green light for ethnic cleansing in Masafer Yatta. The Israeli judicial system is an integral part of the occupation. They are complicit in all the illegality. So the only hope we have is an independent international investigation. And the ICC was created by the international community for this very purpose. So hopefully, because of the particularity of Shireen, she will help us push, or she will help us in the final push to once and for all bring accountability to these killers.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this brings me to my last, because I know you may have to go, but and I link to Mercedes' question earlier. It is crucial that we also follow the contribution or the lack of Western UK media. Let's focus here. During Shireen Abu Akleh's murder, before it and after it, and that very twisted logic, that propaganda rather than journalism, that will always confuse the audience and the readers and the watchers and the listeners and what have you. And that includes the BBC, very regrettable. So we need to make sure that such truth is being reported, that the media is monitored, and that they are also accountable to the kind of language and terminology they use. They always portray the situation as if there is Palestinian violence and some Israeli reaction to it. And they always quote the spin of the Israeli official machine without vetting or making sure. And you know what, even during Abu Akleh's tragic assassination, I was on BBC early on at 5:30 or 6 a.m. And I was saying, you got to listen from the Palestinian journalists, the eyewitnesses who were just standing exactly by her. Mm-hmm. Don't listen to all these machines. Unfortunately, they waited for many hours until they started bringing out other voices. So we need to focus on media, Pauline, a little bit.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. It's unless you're reading international press or even Al Jazeera English, there's much better coverage of international affairs generally. And the BBC is so cautious as to be biased in many cases. Obviously, BBC's got many outlets, and it's very important. I think in this understanding the Palestinian struggle and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, for people to understand the facts of the history and the facts of the reality of the occupation. And part of the work I think that the cross-party group does is, apart from solidarity, it is to try and open up that understanding to more people, to more politicians with influence. And that's why it's important to have MSPs, researchers and staff, because they work in an environment where they are influential and understanding something as, you could say it's complex, but it is actually quite simple once you see it for yourself and understand it. That the only way in which there will be peace in the region is for Palestinians to have an independent, totally not controlled by any other country for themselves, and that's justice, and justice that people like myself, Mercedes, and many others will continue to fight for. Ambassador, we are planning to have you in person whenever you are available after the summer recess, September, October, and we'll continue to talk And I think I'm glad that we've had at least this virtual briefing, because I know that it will lay some foundation for getting a really good turnout for you when you come to visit Scotland later this year. Would you like to make any closing points or remarks? We can't hear. You just need to be on mute.
Just to thank you, Pauline, for all the work you've been doing with your colleagues in the cross-party. Whenever I feel homesick, I think of Scotland, so I come to you to feel a sense of support and warmth. So we love the people of Scotland, and we very much appreciate your support and what you have been doing. While there are so many challenges facing us, I think things are in a way converging. I see that the tide is turning. The tide is turning, especially in the public opinion. The social media is trying to restrict our content, but they can't. It's a phenomenon. I see many young people really realizing the truth. I see something similar to that of South Africa anti-apartheid movement. The consensus by the international human rights is very important. We have so much to build on, Pauline, so much to build on, and I very much look forward to visit you soon to discuss this together and act on this together.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. I hope you're feeling better, because you look. Hopefully, you're well. And on behalf of everyone, can I thank you for your time this afternoon, and we'll be in touch, obviously, with each other as always. And we'll see you in person in September, where we can welcome you after what will be 3 long years, probably, of virtual and no personal meetings. We'll look forward to that this year. So thank you to everyone. Really appreciate your time. I know this has been a really difficult day, a really busy day. So thank you to everyone who's on this call. And I will hopefully have recorded this properly and I will send it round so you can maybe share it with people you think may have an interest. So thank you so much.